You know, they say the slasher movie is dead, and we know for damn sure torture porn is dead.
Mm-hmm.
That being a sub genre, but it's not for lack of trying, because I just showed you The Collector in 2009, and this is another installment of They Should Be Classics, where I show you a film that I think deserves cult classic status at the very least, but that is kind of gone unnoticed, even in the horror genre in this case. So yeah, the film's The Collector. It was brought to us from the two twisted fucks that made a movie called Feast, which is a cult classic. It's very well regarded by a lot of people. Not The Feast, Feast.
Yeah, but The Feast I know.
Yeah, Feast. That Feast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
So these two fellers co-wrote and directed this, and they're also responsible for Saw 4. You know, when it kind of the changing of the guard came into being there. But yeah, man, the film went relatively unnoticed, although it made its money back. You know, and there is a sequel which we haven't seen. I haven't seen either. It has gone kind of under the radar and it's kind of been forgotten. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it came out at the ass end of the torture porn wave. You know, by this time we were already around Saw 6 or 7.
7,000.
So, you know, people were...
Hostel was long dead.
Yeah, Hostel was long dead. People, even horror fans had rebelled against the whole torture porn genre, calling it paper thin and weak and what have you. But, so this thing came out and made a small enough splash, you know, that it got a sequel. But now it's kind of, whatever, you know, nobody cares about it. So, we got to decide, or rather, I've already decided. I think this thing should be a cult classic. But we're going to see what you think about the whole endeavor. So what'd you think overall? Well, what was your first impression of the film?
My first
impression?
When
it first started and then when you finished
it. My first impression was, why can't I hear anything?
Well, that's because the volume was down.
So I was like, all right, now I can hear things.
That's usually what happens with the volume. We're talking about the movie here.
That was my very first impression, though. My second impression was, man, this is a weird soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the end, I was like, yeah, I kind of liked it. Mm-hmm. Won me over.
Now, make no mistake, this fucking movie is... You got to stop fiddling with that thing because it's driving me insane.
You mean this?
That was the next... Oh, something flew out, by the way.
All
but
right.
anyway.
It's probably my ID.
The first thing I got to say about this movie is that it is not for everyone, like, at all.
Yeah.
Which is probably why, on top of when it came out, that's probably why it's still kind of like a well-kept secret even among horror fans. It's not for everyone. It is a cruel and ugly movie. But I say that in a good way. I mean, as far as that goes. It's evident to me that they took some influence from the BTK killers, serial killer, you know, because this basically answers the question, what would the BTK killer be if he was, you know, intermingled with Jigsaw from Saw? This is basically what this movie is. And appropriately enough, this was originally written as a Saw sequel, but it was rejected.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it was rejected by the Saw production people because they were like, no, it's not exactly in the vein we want. So there's too much of this, too much of that. Yeah, that's right. They rejected this one. So they just repurposed and retooled it and made it something completely different, which I think ultimately works much better on its own than there would have been. Because what we really got was Saw 6, which still kept Jigsaw sympathetic and, you know, made him what we know he can be, which is, yes, a horror villain, but at the same time, you kind of, you know, you feel empathy for him in a way. They did that with Saw, and they kept that going. This one, you would have felt no empathy for him, but it does a cool thing where it flips the script.
Yeah, I guess if he was if he like was Jigsaw supposed to be
the collector, yeah,
it would have been weird.
Yeah, it would have been definitely weird. So it's good that this movie is its own thing, and they changed so much of it that it definitely made its own impression. And I think one of the coolest things it brings to the table is a unique and interesting horror villain, which we just don't have that many iconic horror villains anymore. You know, again, at the beginning of this, I talked about people say the slasher is dead, you know, but we've seen plenty. They just don't get the attention
Yeah.
that they used to in the
The
80s.
same people who say the slasher's dead are the same people who are ignoring the movies that are trying to bring
Yeah,
it
I
back.
mean, we have Leslie Vernon. We have, what's his face? Chrome Skull. We have,
The guy from Hatchet.
yeah, Victor Crowley. You know, there are slashers. It's just not a thing anymore. It's not a mainstream thing
Yeah.
anymore. But this
So
one,
every once in a while you get one.
yeah, this one I think fits into that category as well as it does the torture porn category. But yeah, make no mistake, this is not for everyone. But if you can stomach it, then not to say that this is like over the top, fucking gallons of blood pouring out.
Yeah.
But it is gruesome, and it doesn't paint a pretty picture of people. Even your hero is kind of a scumbag to begin with, but they do a really good job with him to turn him into an empathetic hero. But we'll talk about that. So overall, your impression is pretty good.
Yeah.
This is usually what you say.
I was very I was iffy throughout because I was expecting them to do like a lame twist.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what the lame twist I thought they were gonna do, and if they did that, I would have been pissed.
Okay.
Later on.
Okay.
But I was glad they didn't do that because it would have been dumb and made no sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason in my mind, I was like, "There's gonna be this dumb twist," and when it didn't happen, I was like, "All right, cool." It was just like a guy.
Did you think it was going to be a supernatural twist or a
I thought it was
gonna
psychological.
twist?
I thought it was gonna be.
He's the guy. All
they were
along.
gonna do like the freaking Fight Club thing where it's just him.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it
you know
didn't
what?
help that the whole time I was like, man, this guy looks like a rip off Edward Norton. So I was like, oh
The
no,
main character?
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, they're gonna do it, aren't they? And I was gonna be pissed if they did it. Thankfully, they didn't because it would have made no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it would have, but it wouldn't have. I'll say that because this movie resembles another movie quite a bit, and that's High Tension.
Yeah,
And that it's a home invasion movie gone awry, and there's a high kill count with gory aftermath. It resembles that movie a lot, and that movie already has that particular conceit. So if you haven't seen that one, I just ruined it for you. There's a psychological twist where our main character turns out to be the killer. So yeah, in that respect, I would have been like, "Oh, we've already seen this movie."
That's really why, because it would have been like, oh,
it would have been a waste,
not original at all. That being said, I think they do kind of hint at it a couple times.
Yeah, they
if
do
not,
play
that
with
was
the
just
idea.
me like going like, oh, this is what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
But it seemed like they were gonna do that.
You're not alone in that. The first time I saw this, I went down that avenue of thought. I was like, I think this is where they're going, and I wasn't gonna be pissed about it. I was just gonna be kind of let down because it had built up so well, and I think the hints or suggestions actually turned out to be other things, especially the mirror and the parallel between people and the animals or insects in this case in the movie. They really helped and then kind of misled you at the same time, which is good though, because what it ultimately does, it pays off in the sense that it's not trying to trick you.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is a brutal, nasty, straight to the point movie, and it stays that way, which is a good thing in this case. There's no need to get elaborate with this type of fucking
like
formula.
if they would have pulled that, it would have felt like needlessly trying to be complex when really it's just like this.
When it's just what it is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the characters and the actors they portray. Anybody that didn't strike your fancy? Like
Not
that?
really.
Like the little turn of phrase?
I was actually trying to think. Not really. I mean, everybody did their thing. There really isn't a lot of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So even if there were poor actors, you
can't
really
notice,
tell. Yeah, which is good.
Yeah,
I did find it weird.
Ahead.
Like when they first, again, it was just something like off about the sound. When we first started, I couldn't understand what they were saying, but then I kind of got used to it. So I can't really complain.
Okay,
That was just my ear sucking dick.
and that they do.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Everybody does a pretty good job. I remember the first time seeing this, I was iffy about our main character.
Yeah, there's a couple times where I'm like, oh no, he's gonna suck. Thankfully, he doesn't.
Yeah, it's really the character that he's portraying that makes his delivery. I mean, we get to see him deliver lines beyond the initial range we see.
Yeah.
So those worries were dispelled. He is supposed to be kind of weary with his position in life and what have you. But so yeah, everybody pleased me. I gotta give special props to Juan Fernandez, who played the killer in this, the collector. Uh, because again, it takes a specific type of body language to make the faceless enemy work. Not anybody can just do it.
I will say this: I was very iffy on him throughout because I found his movements kind of weird. Like he does a lot of like weird little sneaky moves. But in the end, he won me over. But I would like throughout, I was like, man, these weird little like robber moves are kind of weird. But they kind of grow. They kind of grow on you.
Yeah, I love that, man. It was different, It was his own thing. Yeah, I for one was sold from the beginning with the guy. There was a certain kind of like sleek aliveness in the way he moved, which translated to these weird kind of sneaking around,
like almost cartoonish levels of sneak.
And I think the intent, and I may be wrong about this, was to give the idea of some sort of animalistic. I don't know. Animalistic what?
Thing?
Suggestion to the way he moved. And, I think whether that was the case or not, for sure there was a parallel with the spider. And then I love that they gave him these luminescent eyes, which are only present in animals.
That was cool.
That was pretty neat. And the mask that he wears is kind of like a crisscross between David Cronenberg's mask in Nightbreed and a luchador mask, which is pretty fucking neat. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, he certainly brings something different to the table, and it causes an impression. He cuts an imposing figure on top of that. Despite being very thin-framed, he doesn't walk like you normally see people walk. There's kind of like a weird, I don't know, when he's not being sleek and creepy,
weird, sneaky.
He's got like this weird lumbering gait.
I would say that to the first like half of the movie, I was kind of like they should have gone with someone more big or someone more skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I would have been fine with it. But once the movie ended, I was like, yeah, he was cool.
Yeah.
But while I was watching, I was like, he could be a little bigger, or he could be a little weirder. But at the end, he won me over.
Yeah. Everybody else is just supporting characters, and they're basically, most of them are cannon fodder, except for our main character, who is, just to give you a quick, if you haven't seen this movie, a quick summary of the plot. It's basically this weary, in-debt handyman that's been to prison before, and he needs to get his wife and his own kid out of the grip of loan sharks. So he decides to pull a job on the people that are employing him and rob their house because the father of the family is a jeweler. And lo and behold, when he gets there, there's already somebody there, and this person is the collector, a serial killer basically, that literally collects people. So man, everybody in the family ends up being basically cannon fodder, but they draw up enough empathy for them, like especially when they set up that he really wants to have a relationship with his daughter because of the situation with his wife, he can't. So he kind of like he forms kind of like a kinship with this family's daughter, which really, 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 really intensifies kind of like the thrilling portions of this movie because there's so much at stake. Because he doesn't have to stay behind and help him. He could literally escape at one point, but he doesn't. And that really, for me, like,
I will say that was kind of like the turning point for me.
Yeah.
Because like he's trying to help all the other people horribly, I might add. He just gets them killed.
Yeah.
And it feels a little like, where's this going for a little bit? But then once they bring the kid back in, and you should have known it was coming. I mean, then looking back, it's pretty obvious that was going to come. But once it comes, you're like, okay, now there's a point.
Yeah, it solidifies.
And then like you're right, everything becomes more like engaging.
Yeah, and it's hard to make an unlikable character, or a character with a lot of unlikable traits, I should say, that likable, because he does try to help, and it all goes awry, and you want him so desperately to at least get one of them out, but like you said, deep down inside something's gonna happen and it's gonna fuck up, but you want him so desperately to save these people, and again, back of your head, you're always thinking about the little girl, so it pays off in that respect by playing familiar ground, but then it ratchets up the tension because, again, playing with what you know, it's just that much more tense. And then it makes you think, shit, at this point in the movie, the little girl could die
Yeah.
the way things are going. So that's good, man, because it keeps you invested in the movie. So I actually was really, really pleased with that. So now let's talk about the effects in this movie. They were brought to us by Gary J. Tunnicliffe, which we've mentioned recently if you've seen our Hellraiser retrospectives. He's the guy that got involved in the effects work from Part 3 forward. He was not in charge of the effects in Part 3, though. He was just a guy on the team. But he did the effects for this, and there's a lot of cruel and nasty, nay, downright brutal traps, basically, in this movie, because the collector sets up all these crazy fucking traps to avoid people getting away.
I do have a problem with that.
Do tell.
In that you assume these traps were already set up because the dad was already all hurt and shit.
Right.
But the guy just waltzes in there without triggering any of the traps.
He had already been in there. And the way the guy came in was through the front door, which was not trapped yet. Remember, there was one staircase that wasn't trapped because the daughter was out. So the collector had left the avenue of passage for the daughter to come back.
I guess.
But then this dude comes in, and the collector had already kind of done his thing.
It was weird. Like right after he does this, right after he notices there's like traps everywhere, and he like can't go anywhere without getting trapped, which was a little odd, given that he just went in there. But I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, if you notice it, if you go back and watch the movie again, there's a straight avenue into the core of the house, but everything branching away from that is trapped, in essence. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, getting back to the effects, what did you think about the effectiveness of the effects?
They were pretty good. I will say that the cat getting flung at the guillotine was pretty.
No, wait, second best effect.
It was pretty hilarious. The dog getting a trash can fired and then thrown at the collector was pretty funny. But other than that, everything was pretty effective. I will say that it never reached the point where I was kind of like, "Ow, this hurts." There was only one part and that was with the razor blade hand. Mm-hmm. Which I guess is all right. It's not what I was looking for. I was just like, oh, as long as they look cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were all pretty cool. Especially Bear Trap face was pretty rad.
Yeah, they definitely don't shy away from the grue in this. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And yeah, I was very pleased with the effects. They look good. They look uncomfortable as shit. And some of the traps, for me, it did reach the level of discomfort for me. And especially, for me, it was the telephone with a needle in it. I mean, just the idea of that piercing your eardrum.
Yeah, it's more the idea.
Yeah. And I think that's where this movie works. Despite it being pretty gruesome, it doesn't go whole hog like a Saw movie would. It just gives you enough. It's like it strikes a balance between the gruesome and the suggestion of pain. Which is, again, that's kind of hard to do because once the gore starts a-flying, you're pretty much in that territory.
I will say that throughout I was kind of like, there's a lot of gore, but I never reached the point where I was like, oh, this is just showcasing gore.
Yeah, it doesn't, which is good.
Yeah, it was more like, okay, this is happening. Makes sense.
It really feeds into the suspenseful quality of the movie.
It's not like Hostel where it just takes like 20 minutes to show you some gore and you're like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully this movie knows how to balance it. But if you are a gore hound, you do get enough of that. But if you're looking for suspense, thankfully it doesn't rob it of that because it's pretty much a thriller from, like a quarter in the movie in forward. It's just pulse-pounding thrills. Anyway, speaking of pulse-pounding, let's talk about the score in this bad boy, which is literally pulse-pounding beats of techno-electro music most of the time.
It's weird. It's weird, but it kind of grew on me. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you exactly when I was sold on it, and that's when he's doing his little lockpick and the mega bass starts.
Oh yeah, that was great. I
was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then from then on, I was like, all right, this is cool.
Yeah, that was that's my favorite. Something breaking in the computer right now.
Literally got a blue screen of death.
Yeah, man, that was my favorite part too because it's that key moment, not only for the movie but in all respects. The score works into it. What is happening on the screen works into it. It's a very big suspense moment. So Yeah, and it literally reverberates through your fucking body.
Yep.
So if you don't notice a score at that point, you will. But yeah, man, really unique. Gives it a unique flavor. Uh, like the fucking score could easily fit in a German fucking rave. But
It kind of
you
reminded
know,
me of like the main theme that they showed in the beginning. Kind of reminded. I mean, it doesn't sound anything like it, but that's what it reminded me of. Was the Suffering
oh yeah, yeah,
soundtrack, where it's just kind of weird sounds,
mm-hmm.
but it's cool sounding.
Yeah.
Even then, though, it was still a little iffy on it until that part happened. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And then from then on, I kind of liked it. So yeah, it was an interesting score. It was bizarre for sure.
Now
but it ended up working.
The action in this movie kind of fits hand in hand with the effects because it's trap heavy, if you will. But also kind of shares the stage with the way the suspense is built. And this is basically a suspense thriller action movie. From, like I said, like a quarter into the movie forward, it's just what you're getting. So it's nonstop thrills. If you're into that sort of thing, and this is probably going to be your bag. Did any of the action and or how it related to the effects and setups disappoint you? Was it all thrilling enough for you?
Yeah, I thought it was all pretty good. The only time I was a little like iffy about it was when
I like how doubtful you are. I'm always iffy about this. No, but I get you. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was like the only time that I was kind of like, oh, this kind of weird feeling. Was when the older daughter came in, and it just kind of became like a weird teen sex romp. But it ended up paying off. So I was like, okay. But during that little bit where they're kind of like fondling, I was like, this kind of came out of nowhere. Weird.
Well, they set it up.
Yeah, they do.
Movie,
but it's kind of it felt like feeling wise because it was so tense leading up to that. It felt a little off. But then it ended up paying off, and I like that little kind of like when she notices him. That was
that was pretty great.
But that was the only time that I was kind of like, whoa, where's this? And then it ended up fitting. So I was like, okay, that's cool. My initial worry was pointless.
Yeah, man, I absolutely love the action in this movie. The suspense really, it works, man. There was never a dull moment in the movie. And sometimes when you get these non-stop thrill type of movies, they either hit too much of a thrill and then you become numb to it, or they do this dip in the middle where you're like, okay, well, there's nothing happening anymore, and I got all excited, but now I got a floppy boner, and then at the end, they'll pick up again.
Yeah.
This doesn't do that. This is like straight to the end. You're like, and in fact, how exciting it is in that respect, how exciting the action is, may help you overlook if you have any issues with something. It may help you overlook that because you're so invested in just get this fucking guy out of the house. Save somebody, damn it.
I was a little bit annoyed, but it ended up, it was good for the movie. It was a good annoyance. Mm-hmm. I was a little bit annoyed with how this guy would enter rooms. He was never looking forward, and I was like, dude, you just like got your ear pierced, and you're like freaking running into wires and shit, you're always like going like this, and you're like, serious?
But if you notice, I'm sure you did, he does do that, but it's always like a new room. He learns how to use his environment. For example, the biggest blaring example is the creak in the stairs, which even the collector continues to ignore. But he learns to use his environment eventually. He does fall into rooms, and he should have been like maybe every fucking room is trapped.
And I'll say this: it's mostly when it first starts that he's just like walking into rooms and shit without even looking. You're like, all right, dude. But then he, like you said, eventually does kind of like
he
adapt to it. But at first it was like, damn it, dude, you just got your ear pierced. But it wasn't like in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, stop doing that.
Again, it's like screaming at the screen in the movie, but because you like it.
Yeah.
That kind of annoyance. But anyway, let's talk about the final thing here to tick off. And that's the visual and aesthetic look of this thing. It is a very glum, kind of monotone movie in terms of how it looks. Either shades of black and blue, or sometimes like a sepia tone at times. What do you think? Did you like that? Did you not like that?
Yeah, it fit. I'll say that I kind of liked the weird graininess it had.
Yes, give it a dirty, gritty VHS feel.
I wouldn't go that far, but it did look cool. So I won't oppose that, despite the fact that it just did.
Yep.
Anyway,
so that's how that works.
CGI spiders were a little weird. but I kind of get why they were there.
We're going back to effects, but we'll get to that right now. I'm with you in terms of how the film's look contributes to, or is to its benefit. The grainy look is great. I think it adds something, kind of like the grainy look adds something to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
You know, it has that same feeling, and the washes of color that are very monotone contributes to like the bleak fucking outlook of the entire fucking affair. But yes, going back to the effects, there are a couple of effects that are not physical in this movie, and they're pretty much restrained to insects, and that is a spider and some fucking wasps that they show.
Yeah.
And they use these to parallel with the characters, our main character and the collector, as the collector is a predator, and it kind of ties into the way everything finishes off at the end in terms of identifying who the collector is and what happens at the end. No, I'm not going to ruin that, but the effects are clearly CGI effects.
Yeah.
But you think this is a small production.
They're not horrible.
Yeah, they're not horrible.
They're not bad, but you're like it's a little weird because there's not really any other
CGI effects.
So when you see it, you're like, that's weird.
They stand out, but but like you said, they're not horrible. They're not like the hyenas in The Exorcist, the fucking prequel, Dominion. So that's good. But then you think about it, they'd have to train a spider to do certain things and the wasp to do certain things. And so it's a very small thing, a nitpick, if you will. Anyway, let's give this a final score. First of all, okay, go ahead.
I will say that I was pleased with that they didn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I was
the twist that you expected.
I was expecting either a twist or them explaining or showing what the collector is.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up just kind of liking that he was just like a weird dude.
Yes. Before you go further than that, that's one of the brilliant strokes in this movie, and I think it will go unappreciated by a lot of people. Like tons of fucking great horror writers subscribe to this, especially my favorite, Clive Barker. The most horrifying thing about evil, it's its banality. It's how it's anybody. It could be that guy right there. It was kind of
like that thing in the guy in Gerald's Game, where it's just like a weird, creepy guy.
Yeah, it's just a guy.
And you learn about him, you're like, ooh.
Yeah, it makes it more unsettling.
Yeah.
And I think, that's one of the most brilliant strokes in this movie. And again, it ties into the BTK killer. He was just a guy, and he was basically a maintenance guy. And he cased places just to go back and do what he did. And he was a horrifying person, but he was just your next door neighbor. He was the guy that went to church. He was and so it's great that that touched on you. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt your thought, but it's pretty worthy.
I thought that was the most
the cherry on the sundae.
The good thing, because I was expecting them to explain it or it's like there's that thing with the loan sharks in the beginning, and his name's the collector. So you're like, are they gonna tie this into that in some way, or is it gonna be some weird freaking? You just expect an explanation that's kind of like out there, and when you don't get it, and it's just like a dude. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's actually, I wouldn't say spookier, but it's good that they didn't try to do something clever and fail. Instead, they just gave you something that can happen and succeeded.
Yeah. As is often the case. But that's great that you point that out. First of all, before we grade this, does it deserve, do you think, a cult status? Yay or nay? Give it to me. Go.
I think for the horror crowd. I have seen some people talk about it on some horror groups, but usually it's just like, have y'all seen this? And everybody's like, nah.
No.
Pretty much.
I'm with you. It definitely deserves a cult status. I hope y'all catch it if you haven't seen it. Tell us what you think if you have, or when you do see it. But let's give this a final rating on a scale of 1 to 10. Where do you put it? Again, these ratings have to, we're not comparing this to Citizen Kane here. It's just,
or Paddington 2.
Or Paddington 2,
apparently. It's a perfect movie.
But, in this genre where it belongs.
I'll say this. I really liked it. I think I might have to watch it again just because I was expecting certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still really, really impressed. So I'll give it a solid 8.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a perfect movie, but it's a very enjoyable movie. So yeah.
I'll give it an 8.5. It is a pulse pounding fun old time. I said that.
All right.
It'll make you wince. It'll make you groan. It'll make you go, please save someone, and then they won't.
Yep.
But
it'll make you laugh at dogs getting their heads burned.
it is hilarious. And that cat though.
Ooh, that cat.
I never thought I would laugh at an animal dying in a movie, but this one did it.
Pretty funny.
Twice.
Yep.
Hilarious, man.
He couldn't even save the damn cat, dude.
It was awesome. But yeah, man, I'm very interested to see what part 2 offers. Maybe it's a stinker. Maybe it's not.
Yeah,
but we shall see.
I hope they don't try to like make him some sort of weird.
Even if they do, there is room to go somewhere to explore him. But yeah, maybe not give him too much of a background.
Yeah.
But there's definitely room to explore him. And I think this movie stands alone to make its point. And you can only go so much with such a barren formula, you know?
True.
So there is room for exploring the character. It's how they do it. It's really how it is. So I hope what they do give us is good. So we'll see. Check
as
that
long
out.
as he doesn't have like Costas Mandalore pulling the strings the whole time.
Costas. Anyway, we're gonna go hang out with Costas Mandalore.
Yep.
Because he's not doing anything.
Nope.
This has been Ahab. That's the GoonTick. And we're out. Like, share, subscribe. Hit those notifications for more movie mania and other assorted bullshittery that we are responsible for. Goodbye, fellers.